Evening and welcome to the third in our series of community town halls regarding a restart to the 2020-2021 school year. My name is Tim Bullis. I lead the communications and community engagement team for Chesterfield County Public Schools, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here tonight. Throughout this evening, we'll be looking at various options that we've been considering to return to learn in the fall, and talking about the operational aspect, the health aspect, the transportation, and of course the instruction of our students, all while doing so in a safe manner. This event tonight is hosted by our School Board Vice Chair and Clover Hill District Representative Dot Heffron and our Bermuda District Representative Ann Coker, and they'll be speaking with us and joining us here shortly. Tonight we have with us several guests who are going to help answer questions. Our Superintendent, Dr. Merv Doherty, our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Thomas Taylor, our Chief of Schools, Dr. Lisa High, our Chief Academic Officer, Sharon Pope, and our newest team member is our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Josh Davis. So they're going to be answering questions as we go along. As you all know, you guys had the opportunity to submit questions during the past 24 hours or so, and submit you did. I think we're up to almost 800 questions that have been submitted for these community meetings at this point. We will also be tonight taking your comments that you leave in our social chat functions. On YouTube and on Facebook, so we will be pulling from those as well. Tonight, just a quick look at the agenda. Ms. Heffron is going to welcome everybody and give a brief statement from the school board. She'll then turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Doherty, who's going to go through the presentation, including the options that we are considering right now. And again, as we noted in our communication to families yesterday, we have added an additional option that we are considering as we look at return to learn. And then after that point, we'll dive right into the questions, of which again there are a number that have been submitted. And again, feel free to submit your questions either through the Google form that was shared yesterday or through the social chat functions that exist right now. And with that, we'll get started. And I'll welcome our School Board Vice Chair, Dot Heffron.
Thanks so much, Tim. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this important conversation. Tonight, Ann Coker, Bermuda District Representative on the school board, and I, Dot Heffron, School Board Vice Chair and Clover Hill District Representative, welcome you to the first of 3 virtual town hall meetings that we will both host together. Now, the purpose of these conversations is to gather constituent feedback regarding Chesterfield's returning to learn options so that we can adopt a plan for the fall that best suits our students and their families, as well as our teachers and staff. And while none of us could have predicted the impact that the pandemic this past spring, Ann and I are proud of our county's commitment to ensuring that learning continued, and we were especially impressed with how our central office staff and high school administrators worked so hard to create meaningful graduation ceremonies to celebrate our class of 2020. Going forward into the fall, we are confident that our outstanding team of educators, administrators, and central office staff will continue that excellence as they plan and provide an engaging learning environment for all our students, regardless of what comes our way. Hearing from our community helps guide us through these tough decisions that we're facing. No matter what learning looks like in the fall, be assured that we are committed to our students, families, and employees. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Merv Doherty.
Ms. Heffron, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and let me get to the beginning of the slide here. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight as we have a chance to share with you the options for returning to school and our opportunities for teaching your children for the 2020-21 school year. And we will answer a lot of questions tonight that you have and also share additional information on decisions that we are making. So as we get started, Ms. Heffron, thank you for the introduction and remarks. We will look at the overview and acknowledgments, a presentation of the options. Knowing that we have an uncertain future moving forward, or as we've noticed lately, the issues that have occurred in several states where they have frozen and even moved backward in a sense in their phases. and have an opportunity to look at the options that we have in preparing for this upcoming school year. So we believe that face-to-face instruction is always the best for our students under normal circumstances. And we want to return quickly to our schools, our students return to the schools, and do it in a safe manner for our students and staff. And we realize that our families want our students to return to school now, but also we understand that there are some that are hesitant about sending their children back. And it's clear that decisions that we make, we will not have 100% census on this of where we're going, but we are going to make sure that we look at the safety of our staff and students and the health conditions that we have, and look at the information that is surrounding Chesterfield and Virginia with the data of the pandemic. The school board is expected to vote on the school for the school division plan for reopening our schools for 2021 at the special called board meeting on July 20th. Everything we were about to discuss tonight is important, but remember that it is as of today that's information. As you know, and have seen through the news and through articles, that this time of history has changed rapidly and sometimes even daily. But we know that where we are now and where we'll be in a few months, even a few weeks, will be different than where we are now. We will continue to make sure that anything that we do, we will communicate with all of our community members, stakeholders, and families. So as we move forward and we're talking about information that we have, we rely on the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, the Governor's Office, the Virginia Department of Health, the Virginia Department of Education, and the Chesterfield County's Risk Management Team, which works with the health departments from the county and the state, and gives us general guidelines on safety and health in our schools. Reviewing executive orders, looking at social distancing guidelines, and other health and operational recommendations that are out there through multiple areas that are sent to us through the state and through the Department of Education. And we know that we'll be changing tomorrow into phase 3, and there's also been discussion of additional phases coming within the near future. We want to make sure that during this time period before the school board has a chance to vote, that we receive information from our staff and students, family and community members, and surveys that we send out and will be sending out in the future on attendance and transportation. And through the course of the next 3 weeks, we will be holding virtual meetings between 80 and 85 meetings, dealing with all aspects of our stakeholders, staff members, parents, etc. The variables that we are looking at is we know individual family choice. It's either in person or virtual. Access for all students for technology and internet. That our operational flexibility, example, how many students are we allowed on the bus, how many students are we allowed in the classroom, and other areas of space in our buildings. For an example, we know that the transportation rules have already changed where it was 1 to 10, now it's 1 per seat, and in the future that could continue to change. The executive order is still in place for face coverings, as well as looking at family schedules of grouping students on different options that we have, and looking at class schedules for our students. So we know that the Department of Education guidelines were set for us, but the opportunity that we have to reopen as the board makes a decision, and they make the final decision according to the Department of Education on the options that we take. We are encouraged to make sure that we work with our local public health departments, as well as looking at community concerns and the facility constraints that we have, looking at spacing on the buses and also in our classrooms. Local school boards may deviate from the Department of Education plans, but we do still submit the health plans and guidance plans for review, but not for approval to the department. In talking with risk management, under the guidelines currently as of the recent guidelines, and I repeat the recent guidelines, that we have 50% capacity, which seems reasonable to them. Also, we know the Department of Labor will provide us on July 15th with workforce guidelines for the state. We also want to make sure that we can have our staff certify that they are well to report to work, that we have plans how to clean classrooms if we have an outbreak in the classroom or a student becomes infected, and that we know that right now that we have students must wear masks if they ride a bus, and or if there are more than one family member that they may sit together. While the options that we have are reviewed by the school board last week, we have included an option to bring students back with some support and information from the community and advice that we receive through our emails and Facebook. But we have to remember that we're going to err on the side of caution, that we're dealing with the health and safety of 63,000 students and 8,000 employees. And we will continue to take the advice of the alignment of the social distancing guidelines from the CDC, the Virginia Department of Health and Risk Management, and guidelines as we continue to look at students returning to school. So what are our options? And the priorities of our options were as follows. Physical safety is important for our students and employees. The social and emotional well-being, serving our most vulnerable students, making sure that we have equitable access to resources. We want to make sure we have flexibility with our communication with everyone, and recovery of lost learning and new learning was extremely important to us in planning our schedules out and options, and making sure that we have professional development and professional learning for all of our staff members. Our most vulnerable students, as we look to start the school year with face-to-face time every day, we looked at our English language learners, all levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then our level 2 adapted curriculum students with disabilities. So option 1, with everyone returning to school, we would parents would have the option either to send their students to school or keep them at home and receive virtual coursework from teachers on a daily basis. This recommendation at the current time was not supported by risk management due to the restrictions of social distancing. The option 2, which is 50% of our students reporting on odd even days. The example, you would come to school on a Monday, receive your full schedule, then have received work to do on Tuesday. You would come back to school on Wednesday, and you would go over your work, receive new curriculum, receive new content, and that option would repeat throughout the school year. So you could either be in school your first week 3 days, the second week be 2 days, and you'd follow an odd even schedule. Option 3 was 50% of our students coming to school, with the Monday being a cleaning day plus contact day of our staff members with students who need help, and professional development with Tuesdays and Thursdays and Wednesdays and Fridays for students coming to school, with the days not in school doing work at home. Option 4 was a similar point, except you would come to school on a Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the second cohort would come on school on the Thursday and Friday. The new adjustment would be the modified option here, where you would come to school on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday would be a cleaning day and a staff day and a contact day for students, and then the other cohort would come on Thursday and Friday. Option 5 is 25% of our students attending school 1 day per week, with Monday being a cleaning day and contact day and professional development day. And then option 6 is virtual learning for all students, no students in the building, and we're preparing, if the issue occurs that the pandemic does come back, that we will be prepared for our students to receive virtual learning K-12 throughout the school district. At this point, we know that tomorrow we are in phase 3. Future phases will change our capacities possibly. The future phases may change the recommendations from the health departments and from the governor's office, as well as from risk management and from the Department of Education. The two options that are most viable for us right now, looking at option 2, which is 50% face-to-face every other day, or option 4B, which is modified, which would occur with students coming on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday and Friday. At this time, Mr. Back to you, and we can begin the questioning.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Doherty. Again, before we move forward, I just want to reiterate, as we'll discuss later, that the virtual learning option would be available under each one of those scenarios if a parent decides they did not feel comfortable sending their child to school. So we'll continue conversations about that shortly. But before we get into the question and answer period and coming in on the social media as we watch as well, I wanted to offer Mrs. Coker and Mrs. Hefferon a chance to share any reflections or observations that they have as an individual board member, again, understanding that no decisions have been made and that we're taking the next 3 weeks to gauge feedback from the public and have 6 more of these to go after tonight. So, Ms. Hefferon, you want to start?
Sure. I think that as I've said before to folks in conversation, this is going to be a really challenging opportunity for us to really realize what compromise means. And I've been told that the true meaning of compromise is when nobody's happy. That's when you know that it's a good compromise. I hope that we can find a happy medium. I hope that we can find a place where we all agree that staff and student safety paramount, and the access to learning. Our students have to come first, and their education has to come first. And whatever gives, we're looking at options that give us the, I'm looking at options that give our students the greatest opportunity to maximize their opportunities to learn.
Thank you, Ms. Hefferon. Ms. Coker?
Yes. First, thank you, Dr. Doherty, for the presentation and giving us the updated information since our last meeting last Tuesday. I'm very thankful that we have a variety of options to review and that these options will accommodate a very fluid nature that are set, the guidelines that are set before us that we must follow. And listening to our community's feedback is very key. Obviously, since last Tuesday's meeting, we've done just that by offering option 4B. So we are hearing what the community is saying and making adjustments as needed. And over the next 3 weeks, we will continue to listen, and with additional surveys, the internal task force that will be held for discussions to be had, as well as continuing our discussions with the community so we know the best way to proceed in the fall. And I look forward to getting this feedback so we can make, as a board, the most informed decision for what September will look like. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coker. We're going to go ahead now and move into the question and answer phase of tonight's community meeting. As we discussed earlier, we solicited questions in the notice sent to families and staff last night about these town halls. And as of 8 o'clock this morning, we had over 500 questions and comments submitted. And right before this meeting tonight, we were closer to 800. We've broken down the questions by magisterial district for meeting purposes, and moving forward, we'll be putting together a frequently asked questions document that will go on our website, mychesterfieldschools.com. Those questions, while they will not all be addressed and answered, we will be taking the themes and the largest number of questions that have been asked and putting them up. But for tonight, we're going to attempt to get through as many of the questions as we can. We'll be pulling the questions from the pre-submitted list that we've gotten over the past 24 hours, and also from the comments in the chat boxes on social media feeds that are carrying tonight's meeting. So with that, let's get started, and we're going to go ahead and tackle one that's really cropped up over the last 12 hours, and it's already been referenced tonight, and that's the American Academy of Pediatrics' recent recommendation, recent as of Friday, that we should return children to school for their physical, emotional, and educational well-being. I'll start off with acknowledging that during the summer, the school division works 4 10-hour days. And so this recommendation came in while we were not in session, so to speak, and after the school board's meeting last Tuesday. So we have asked some of our health experts to take a look at this recommendation and see how it folds into what we've looked at already. And so we'll be seeking their guidance here in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to ask Dr. Taylor to tag on to that a little bit. Dr. Taylor, can you tell us a little bit about the groups that we're relying on for guidance and whose recommendations we're looking at?
Thank you so much, Mr. Bullis. And this is a great opportunity to really share our main focus with this evening's town hall, and also our main focus as a school system. And I would love to tell you and all of our constituents watching right now that instruction is our #1 responsibility. The reality is that student, staff, and campus safety is our #1 responsibility, and instruction is our #2 responsibility. So all of the recommendations and all of the options that we're looking at take into account not only trying to find that optimal instructional opportunity for kids to come in an optimal instructional learning environment, but also one that's going to bring our students back in a safe way. So if you follow the continuum of what Dr. Doherty was presenting, where option 1 was the least restrictive and option 6 was the most restrictive, you get kind of a glimpse of the full spectrum of options that are in front of us. The American Academy of Pediatrics definitely provides one more piece of information for us to look at. But so far to date, we've been following guidance that has come directly from the governor's office, which has relied heavily on the Center for Disease Control, as well as the Virginia Department of Health and their guidance. And that has been then translated into our experts on staff and our shared service with county risk management to turn those into practical recommendations. The Virginia Department of Education released recently its Return to Learning Plan, R 2020, and with that plan, it did give some phased guidance into some of the expectations that we should be following to make sure that we are providing a safe learning environment for both our kids and our staff. So we are right now taking our cues largely from the Virginia Department of Health and the CDC. I'm sure that the AAP guidance will provide some additional feedback to them, and I'm sure that that will be something that gets worked into the discussion as both we evaluate that and as our guidance agencies that are supporting us also evaluate that. I should note, just for the audience at home, the great disappointment that my children experienced when they found out that I was not, in fact, a medical doctor, but an academic doctor. We do not actually have medical expertise as the collection of doctors that are on this evening's town hall, but we do rely on the expertise of a lot of folks that are trained in that. And so we thank our medical practitioners and our first line responders and everybody who's contributing to this dialogue, because those support agencies do have the best of intentions. And even though they don't always agree with one another, their guidance is to keep our students both safe and well cared for. But those are the organizations that we're taking our cues from at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Don't unmute yet. Stay unmuted if you would. Jason and Margaret both submitted written questions, and Jacqueline and others have been on Facebook asking if we're going to be modifying proposals based on the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations and or any other recommendations that might be coming up in the next months.
Well, thank you, friends, for asking that question. And what we can assure you is that if we have learned anything from this experience, it's that we must be flexible, and that everything changes from week to week to week in regard to this situation. We have not received any guidance to date that there will be any phases or any additional instructions after phase 3. But other than that, coming from the governor's office, where they have hinted that there may be some additional guidance and some changes, as that begins to evolve and as those phases start to change, should they change, that would bring us back to the drawing board. It may change our recommendation that ultimately comes before the school board on July 20th. Even bring the school board back into another session to reevaluate new information should the phases change or should new information be provided. It is absolutely our intent to be flexible, and as new information comes to the table, we have conditioned ourselves to be nimble and to adjust as that new information comes to the table and respond with a recommendation to the board with that new information.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Mr. Davis, looks like the next couple of questions are headed your way. I'll start by acknowledging that earlier this week, we reminded staff of questions that they need to ask themselves as they come back into our school buildings in order to return to work. There are a variety of questions that CDC and the health department have recommended that we'll be sharing with parents to make sure that that is also occurring for students when we return to school. The question that comes in from Rachel from the Bermuda district is, my question applies to all options except number 6. Can the transportation department provide a way to sign up for buses only for routes needed? For example, can I transport I can transport both of my children to school and can pick up my elementary student from school, but my middle school student would need to ride the bus home. Can you talk a little bit about how we're going to deal with transportation during this incident?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. And that's a very, very relevant question. And our technology department has made an innovation this summer that's now allowing the parent view system, which is our input for parents to be able to do a variety of things regarding their child, but to also provide them a continuous method to inform us of whether school bus transportation is needed. And, sometimes things change. They may tell us in August that they're not going to need the bus, but circumstances might change in November and they would need the bus. So we can, I don't want them to feel that they'd be locked in for 180 days if they tell us that they don't need the bus. Given the constraints of our transportation systems and the realities of social distancing that we've been asked to deal with, we have greatly reduced capacity this year. There will be fewer students to transport every day if we go to one of these 50% options, which seem to be most likely. But we would certainly be helped if more parents transport their students to school this year. I would prefer that they all are on the school bus because that's the safest way, but that's not going to be the most practical and efficient way this school year. So we hope that we'll be able to communicate with parents, get that information, and be able to fill our buses at least to one child in every seat with siblings seated together. We know that transportation has had difficult moments in the last few years in Chesterfield, but we are working very hard. We look forward to bringing our drivers back, many of whom are very excited to see our students. So thanks for the question. Be happy to continue the dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. As a tag on to that question, with more parents potentially bringing their children to school, we'll be working with the local police department, I assume, to make sure that we've got a little bit of traffic control around our school areas at arrival time and dismissal time.
Yeah, it certainly begs that question, Mr. Bullis, because those pickup and drop-off points are going to be more busy. We're going to need to, frankly, work with each school administrator to look at methods to maximize that throughput, whether it's having more staff members out to unload multiple students from multiple cars at the same time, to perhaps taking those lines that lead to the drop-off point and snake them through parking lots. We do want to get them off the road as soon as possible. There probably will be traffic difficulties, especially early in the year. And yes, we certainly expect that our partners in public safety and the police will provide us some assistance. There are certainly some schools where we will anticipate and expect some difficulty. I know Midlothian Middle's one of them, for example. And so we don't think it's going to be perfect, but we're going to do our best to coordinate, and we may end up staggering some arrival times. Was just chatting with our transportation director this afternoon, and instead of a 10-minute window for all the buses to arrive, maybe we need to spread that out 30 minutes. Maybe the parents that are driving in kind of need a 5-minute slot to aim for their arrival. And so we're going to look for a variety of ways to be as efficient and safe as possible.
Thank you. While we're talking about getting children to school, and I started off with the things that we're going to ask parents to do as the children get to school, Dr. Taylor, I'm going to throw this one to you. Lindsay asks on Facebook, will there be temperature checks? Who will administer? And let's expand on that. If there is a vaccine at any point in time during the next school year, will students be required to have that?
Thank you, Mr. Bullis. I'll take the vaccine part of that question first. Right now, state law does not require that we mandate any type of vaccination for COVID-19. Should state law change, we would add that to our protocols, but as it stands right now, that would not be something that we would require at this time. In terms of temperature checks, we are going to be insisting that families do a self-health check of their child before they send them to school in the morning. This may include a temperature check, but really more a symptoms checklist. Again, not referring to any medical knowledge that I may have, but we will definitely be providing families some guidance on how they can best do this at home. This would definitely optimize the amount of time that we have for instruction once kids are in the schoolhouse versus the school system taking on that responsibility, thus limiting that the amount of time that kids would have in the schoolhouse to be focused on those things. Should we find ourselves in a situation where a child is manifesting symptoms, we've developed protocols with our student health coordinator and team to sequester students who may be in an ill state in a specific area so that they can be cared for, quarantined from the rest of the student population. Pediatric offices across America have figured this out with the well side of the check-in area versus the sick side of the check-in area, and we have focused on doing something similar in our schools as needed. So we will be reacting to those situations as they come about, and being sensitive to those situations in terms of efficiency and making sure that our kids, should we return in a face-to-face environment, have a temperature check. We're going to ask that families take on that responsibility ahead of time.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Mr. Davis, I have one coming up for you, but I want to jump to Dr. High with a question that just came in from Adam, asking, are we enforce the don't bring your child to school if they're sick rule? If you could talk a little bit about the areas that we're going to be designating in schools for sick children, so that we can isolate them from other students, and what we do when a child does present with symptoms.
In our conversation yesterday, we talked with our health coordinator we would use the clinic that's currently set up in our school for more ill students who present some of the symptoms. We would find another area that is not too far away from this area, so that we could have our nurse assistant be able to be there, or have another instructional aide or someone support that area for maybe a student who has fallen and has hurt themselves and needs some ice. What was the second part of the question, Mr. Bullis?
The confirmation that we do work to contact parents to invite them, ask them, request that they come back and pick up their children when they're sick. We will continue that practice, correct?
Yes, that is correct. We will continue that practice. And, if a student has been out sick and they, come back and they present some issues, we will definitely have our nurses checking in on those students when they return to make sure they're feeling well. And I think our staff will be more vigilant to check on students if they're don't seem to be themselves or presenting, being tired or not feeling well. So our staff will be more as well to check on children to make sure that they're feeling well and healthy.
Okay. Mr. Davis, I promise I'm going to get back to you in just a minute, but Dr. Hyde just opened the door to another question that's come in, and that's about for Dr. Taylor, nurses in schools, and what are we doing to close the gap to make sure that there is a nurse in every school?
Well, Mr. Bullis and friends, there's nothing like a pandemic to re-emphasize the need for health services in our schools. And this has been something that we have been working towards and fighting for quite some time in Chesterfield County. We do have a clinic assistant assigned to all of our schools, and some of our schools share a nurse, although the majority of our schools have nurses. Not all of them do, but it is our plan to look inside our base budget to make adjustments to provide a nurse for every school. This is going to be critically important, and this all kind of is built on a notion that we like to follow in Chesterfield County Public Schools, which is that we believe in following Maslow's before Bloom's. And if you're at all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we look at the whole child first. Their physical needs, their social emotional needs, and then their learning needs. Because we know that children cannot learn unless those physical and social emotional needs are well cared for first. And our bringing a nurse into every school is a critical part of that mission. So, speaking of which, our student health coordinator, Nick Euler, who is a registered nurse, has been working with us as a part of this task force to help plan and help guide each step of the way to make sure that we are providing the appropriate protective equipment to staff, that we are following the appropriate procedures, both from a medically sound basis, but also from a staff and student protection basis. But to allay some concerns, we may not have a nurse in every school building on the very first day of school because they are in short supply, but it is our commitment to make sure that this position is staffed adequately and that our schools can have that singular point of contact that they can refer back to at some point this fall as we get rolling.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Mr. Davis, we're finally going to get back to you. Now that we get children to school safe and well, what are we doing to the learning environment to make sure that it is clean? This question comes in from the Bermuda district. When cold and flu season comes and numbers get high again, do we have a plan to address illnesses? What are we going to be doing to keep schools clean with regard to soap in all the bathrooms, wiping down high touch areas? What exactly is our plan to protect students in that regard?
I'm sure that's of deep interest, and we hear the term deep cleaning used a lot, and I think I'm going to say we're going to do vigorous cleaning, and it's going to continue at all times. We need a health and safety, safe environment for our students, and so our day porters that work in the school every day will be active, taking care of those high touch areas during the day. Bathrooms will probably be cleaned about 4 times a day. Any eating surfaces, we'll probably be visiting classrooms right after lunch, hopefully when kids are out recessed to take care of those and get them clean again. High touch areas are going to get a lot of attention. Then we've got our contract custodians, which work every afternoon and evening to, again, keep the building clean and ready for the next day. So it's going to be a big chore. It's really going to be everybody's responsibility, but the primary responsibility comes with those staff members that I mentioned to you. We've identified the appropriate cleansers, disinfectant chemicals. There's 3 different ones that'll be used at every school for a variety of reasons, and they are certainly going to be ones that are capable of taking the virus out if it happens to enter our schools. And we hope that we don't have to close the school due to an outbreak, but then that truly deeper, vigorous cleaning would have to continue and take place for a day or so before we could reopen a building, and we would coordinate closely with the Virginia Department of Health, our local office, to determine exactly what actions would be required and take place in such a circumstance.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Davis. We're working our way down to the instruction questions. I promise they're coming. The next question, though, is from Meg in the Clover Hill district. She wants to talk about childcare, so I'm going to ask either Dr. Taylor or Dr. Hyde to chime in on this one. The general question, the broader question is, what are we going to be doing to work with the daycares to make sure that they're able to help our students with the instructional aspects when they're not in school? Specifically, this question is, how does the county expect single parents or a single income parent to work or afford before or after school daycare while also expecting kids to get instruction in? And so I'll open that up to either Dr. Hyde or Dr. Taylor, whichever would like to have it.
I'll jump in on this first, and Dr. Hyde, if you'll close the gap in any areas that I might have missed tied to instruction. I think if there's something that we can all agree on as parents of kids during this entire process, where there have been work expectations and also childcare expectations, is that this has been very difficult and a huge imposition. We definitely want to thank our parents who have stepped up. You were your child's first teacher, and you continue to be the most influential figure in your child's life. And you will be that for the rest of their life. And we get to just enjoy a small snippet of our experience with your child. But this is going to be something that continues on this fall, depending on how these phases play out and the guidance that we've received in terms of what we're allowed to do. Truth be told, we would love to bring all of our children back tomorrow, get them rolling a little early even. I don't want to get anyone excited, but the reality is that we will bring them back as soon as we are able, and we can meet the appropriate guidelines to do so. One of the positive byproducts that has come from this experience is that we will be firming up our relationship with daycare providers in terms of making sure that our instructional resources are provided to our daycare providers in the community, and really anybody who wants them and is willing to engage and is willing to ask for those resources. We'll be proactively reaching out to our daycare providers to make sure that they do have access to things like Canvas and some of the online resources that our kids are going to be using, so that their time away from the schoolhouse and the brick and mortar setting can be productive. And we do think that that's critically important. As far as the inconvenience and affordability, I think that that's a shared issue that all of our families are facing right now. Whether you're a teacher in the classroom and have that same concern and that same issue, or a parent who's working in private industry and may have to deal with a hybrid schedule or just a solely virtual schedule, the struggle is very real, and we are trying to work with our providers to provide not only capacity and to increase capacity where available, but also to make sure that we are able to accommodate as many students as is viably safe in our schoolhouse during the regular school day.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Let's go ahead and jump into instruction. Our business is teaching and learning after we get kids to school and after we make sure that they're safe and well. Dr. Pope, Justin on our social media channels wants to know exactly what virtual learning looks like. What should parents expect in the event that we have to open there, or that parents choose that?
Great question. And I am certain that most of those listening today have heard so many terms recently. We have hybrid learning and parallel learning and virtual learning and online learning and distance learning, and how can a parent or any of us keep it straight? And depending which website you go to for any of those terms, you'll get a different definition. So I think what's most important for our listeners right now is, what does Chesterfield County Public Schools mean when we use those terms? So specifically, Mr. Bullis, your question was about distance learning. And I want to make the distinction here for everyone listening that we think of distance learning as part of our hybrid model. And our hybrid model was illustrated through many of the options that Dr. Daugherty shared earlier. And in the hybrid model, you basically have students divided into different groups. Let's say 50-50, so 50% of our students would come to school and receive face-to-face instruction, possibly 2 days a week. And then they would return to their homes, and the other 50% of that teacher's roster would come into her classroom and receive face-to-face instruction. When not in the classroom with the face-to-face teacher, the students who are at home are actually going to be participating in what we call distance learning. That means it is asynchronous, it is independent, but it is work that the teacher that they see 2 days a week has assigned to them. So they're completing the teacher's work. They may be using some of the learning applications or the courseware that we're providing across our district. So hopefully it will be highly engaging, fun work, not copious amounts of worksheet packets, for example, but a very engaging platform, because we know that we're assuring our students will have devices and connectivity. But that distance learning is one that is asynchronous, which means they wouldn't be able to sit at home on their Chesterfield provided device, be in a platform that their teacher has asked them to complete maybe units, mastery quizzes in, and immediately raise a hand and ask the teacher the question. Those teachers will be available to students to support them, but let's remember, when students are at home, that same teacher has students in front of her in her classroom at the same time. So that's the distance learning term and what we mean by that. The other term that we're using quite a bit and we're getting quite a few parent questions on is, will I have, as a parent, the option for my child to continue learning, but virtually? And I believe when our parents use that word, virtually, what we're really asking in that question is, can I have my child learn 100% of the time from another location other than that classroom? So possibly my home, or possibly a daycare, or at a relative's house during the school day. That virtual learning is something that we too want to support as Chesterfield County Public Schools and as teachers. That is more of the offer right now with CCPS Online, where we have teachers who support. The teachers would check in. They would help students set goals. They would progress monitor with students. They would help deliver instruction in key concept areas where student keeps getting snagged up in the learning. But that again is an asynchronous opportunity with teacher check-ins occasionally. Remember, in virtual 100%, you do not see that teacher face-to-face for any time. So just wanted to kind of clarify those differences. I hope that helped.
It does. Thank you. Dr. High, she opened that door to learning through technology. Can you, what we're going to be doing this school year to make sure that every student has access to the internet and a learning device?
So in March, we were, at the time that school went to learning at home, we were 5th through 12th grade, 1-to-1. Since that time, we have worked on providing devices to students in grades 2 through 4. During the summer recovery of learning, we are, any student who is engaged in this program this summer are looking to provide them not only a Chromebook, but also access through either a hotspot or through Comcast Essentials. The goal is for August to have every student pre-K through 12 to have a device, as well as access to the internet through either the hotspot or through Comcast Essentials. We know that there are some locations that are not able to access the Comcast, so we will look to make sure that those families have a hotspot in their home. So our goal is to have 100% devices in the hands of students and for them to be able to have access. So that's something that we're working hard and excited about that work with the community. Dr. Daugherty has gone out and gotten donors to help support and offset the cost of devices as well as the internet access. And so we have community engagement in supporting our students, which is really nice in this community to have.
Thank you, Dr. High. Dr. Pope, I'm going to jump back over to you. And this question came pre-submitted from Emily and Ashley, and both from the Clover Hill District and numerous people on our social media feeds, and has to do with special education. So they're wanting to know more about what sort of special education services our students will see and receive. Ashley asked, will students with IEPs be given a preference for in-person instruction?
Okay, so first I'll just reference back to one of Dr. Daugherty's slides that he presented earlier. I think it's worth emphasizing that slide multiple times. I think it was probably about slide 15 in the slide deck. And that slide specifically spoke to some of our more vulnerable learner groups. And as we look at our English language learners, for example, we feel it's very important to bring in our levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 students for as much face-to-face instructional time as possible. So as the slide indicated, when school was open, we would hope that those students could join us for each of those instructional face-to-face days. Likewise, with our level 2 services that we provide to our students with disabilities, we absolutely believe it would be important for those students to be one of our very first groups that come back and have that opportunity to participate face-to-face every day that our school doors are open. We do know that in some of our programs, such as ADP, IDP, and students in that more self-contained classroom setting, it is very likely, because they naturally do have much lower class sizes, that the students in those learning environments will also be able to come back and join us every day for those face-to-face learning experiences. I love the options that we are considering, because obviously with all the effort and the amount of time we've focused on those options, it shows that we're truly looking for the very best solution to whatever the scenario is that we face. But even within those options, I really want to emphasize that wherever we land with our school board's decision in July, we're going to look at that option that's selected, and we're going to try to stretch it. And we're going to try to stretch it to make it work for all of our students. And we know that every single child has a different need, and it's never one size fits all. So I think when we look at, for example, career and technical centers, we look at our ELL and our special education students. When we look at some of our dual enrollment opportunities, those are special groups and special programs that will require us to think a little harder and stretch whatever option we land on a little further to be sure that we're meeting every student's need to the very best of our ability.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hyde, Dr. Pope, I'm not sure which one of you wants to take this, but Carrie on social media on our Facebook page asked, are teachers going to go through development training over the summer to be able to provide the best experience for these various, including distance learning experiences?
I love Carrie's question. I believe that when March 13th hit this past spring, that we had phenomenal teachers who did a phenomenal job. We had some amazing stories and examples that came to us, but we do know, and we have to be honest about this, that not every child had the same experience. And shame on us as lifelong learners if we can't get better should we face more virtual learning. That means, first and foremost, we have to prepare our teachers. In fairness to our teachers, we were not expecting on March 13th to pivot and everyone would teach the remaining 14 to 15 weeks in a virtual way. So that means helping all of our teachers really have a baseline of skills. And we've presented this before to the school board, and I'm happy to report we're seeing great success. We have offered so many trainings since COVID hit that is specific to teachers to build their learning pedagogy and what does a great virtual or distance learning teacher look like? What do you do? How do you keep students engaged? We've addressed how do we ensure that even when we're not with our students face-to-face in our buildings, that we're checking on their social and emotional well-being, their mental health. We've looked at how can we take our special education modifications and accommodations. How can we take those supports that are written into an IEP for classroom delivery and modify and still attempt to deliver to the very best of our ability what each student needs? Teachers need trained in how to do those things that they've never been trained to do before. We have expectations. They're always high in Chesterfield, and we know our teachers always come through and deliver. We shared with teachers the final week of school a preview video that explained very clearly to each of our teachers what would be expected when they returned, so that in the fall, even if in our best case scenario on September 8th, we were all back in our buildings, we know that there is the potential with COVID-19 to hit spikes and to return to some earlier phase where we're maybe not always in that face-to-face setting. So shame on us if round 2 of any type of virtual or distance instruction is not better than we provided in round 1. Teachers understand that there will be a baseline expectation that we all use Canvas. We heard so clearly from our parents that it was frustrating and difficult with multiple children, possibly at multiple levels in our school system, and teachers each independently selecting how they were going to deliver instruction. We had some Zoom, we had some Google Hangout, we had synchronous, we had asynchronous. We had parents, I think Mr. Bullis, you and I had a conversation one time about the number of emails that one parent could receive from a variety of teachers. And all of it was with the very best intention, but we know to better serve our greatest partner, which is our parents, we have to do better. We have to make this simpler on them. And that means delivering all of our learning instruction through our common, united, singular learning management system called Canvas. We're going into the third year of Canvas coming school year. We have some teachers who jumped in very quickly, and they have become our experts, and they are certainly able and positioned to help their colleagues. We've placed instructional designers in every school building to help teach not only master Canvas and make everything deliverable through that one source to our parents, but also to help our teachers with some of our newest learning apps and courseware that we've purchased. So I think we're prepared to prepare our teachers to do the wonderful job they can do. We are setting aside one day of time during the returning teacher week. And during that one day, any teacher who chose not to complete their Canvas basics training, that will be a requirement, or get checked off in their mastery quizzes that they need to prove that mastery to us with, they will have that day during teacher week when they return to catch up with that. We are offering multiple opportunities this summer. I have to say I'm so proud of teachers because I know they were tired at the end of the year, but although we had all of those offerings for professional learning out there, they mean nothing if a teacher doesn't sign up and take the course. And we had thousands of teachers, even during the final month of school, sign up, and they were eager to take the courses that are being offered. So I feel our teachers have plenty of offerings. We do have expectations that are non-negotiable of some of those PDs being completed before the first day of school. And I can assure you that our teachers are already jumping in and getting it done.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Pope.
And
Dr.
Mr. Bullis, one of the other things that we've done is really, Dr. Taylor talked about Maslow before Bloom's. And so we have worked with our unified health team to develop social emotional learning opportunities for our teachers and professional development opportunities for them. So we have over 50 or 60 different options for teachers to take. And then the last piece that we did was a self-care workshop. And that began with our directors. We started at the director's level, then we provided that same self-care PD to our principals, who then in turn had faculty meetings set up with their teachers, because we know that our educators must take care of themselves so that they are prepared to work with our students and to provide what our students need when they are with us face-to-face, as well as when they are at home learning. So that's something that we want to focus on, is that social emotional and making sure we take care of ourselves throughout the process.
Thank you, Dr. Hyatt. We're about an hour into tonight's session. That leaves about 30 minutes left. I still have a lot of questions to get through. Did want to play catch up though for those of you who didn't join us, weren't able to join us at the very beginning. We've gone through a number of options that we're looking at. Those are available on our school division's website, mychesterfieldschools.com. In each of those options, there are opportunities for student learning, obviously. Some of them include bringing students back. Others include the opportunity for all virtual. Just a friendly reminder that parents will have the opportunity, if we bring students back, to select to keep their child in school. Dr. High, along those lines, one of the questions that came in from Laura was, how are we going to track people in the decisions that they make? Meaning, if they choose at the beginning of the year to start virtually, how long do they have to stay in that virtual program? Or vice versa, if they start in the classroom, how long do they have to stay in the classroom before they can migrate to another opportunity?
We know that, making a decision will be difficult for families, and they may make a decision early on, and then circumstances may change throughout the learning period. We're looking at a 9-week period at a minimum to make that change. We could be looking at semesters, but we think we'll start with the conversation has been around the 9-week period for parents to be able to pivot and make a change. We will be continually talking back with our families to ensure that we know what the needs, if the needs are changing, and addressing those needs while they're still at home in that virtual setting. So we won't leave them out high and dry if they're struggling and need a difference.
Great, Dr. High, Dr. Taylor. I'm not sure which one of you wants this one, but question wants to know what we're going to do if there is an outbreak in school, or if a staff member or a student presents and is confirmed with a COVID-19 case, what are the next steps we do in terms of cleaning, student notification, parent notification, that type of thing?
Thank you, Mr. Bullis, and I'll take that. And Dr. Hyde, please fill in if there's anything that I missed. There's a couple of things that we keep in mind and that we practice with fidelity, and that the first one being the family educational privacy rights, are also known as FERPA, and the health component tied to that being HIPAA, where we would not release the names of anybody who contracted any type of illness, whether it be COVID or otherwise. We would definitely focus on how we could clean up the areas that we know were in direct contact, following the protocols that have been outlined for us, not only by the CDC and the Virginia Department of Health, but by our own risk management team. We would not notify folks unless there was a reason to or action that was required. Just because a student or a staff member has fallen ill within a school, per CDC guidelines and per the Virginia Department of Health, that is not necessarily
Welcome back, folks. Thank you for your patience as we experience some technical difficulties here. This conversation has been so popular, it appears that we broke the internet tonight. So our apologies for being down for the last few minutes. As we wrap up tonight's session, please know, first of all, that we have not kept talking while you've not been with us. So we've just stayed in place, and Dr. Taylor is going to get back to some answers. But we have a few last questions to wrap up. Ms. Heffron and Ms. Coker have some questions as well. Then we'll have a closing, and if you're so up to it, you can rejoin us tomorrow for yet round two of these. So Dr. Taylor, when we broke off from everybody, we were talking about notification in the event that there was a confirmed case of COVID, whether it was staff or students.
Yeah, so the short version of this is that we're going to notify families, students, and parents when action is required. We have an obligation to follow HIPAA as well as FERPA, the Family Educational Privacy Rights Act. So we won't be releasing information about the identity of anybody who is ill or what they're ill from, but we will notify parents if there is a reason to be concerned or if they have been in direct contact with somebody who has been ill. We will be following a pretty steep cleaning protocol. A big question that has come up that we have been working through is what happens if a student becomes ill or starts manifesting symptoms, or if a staff member starts manifesting symptoms at the workplace, at school. We will be quarantining them into a special area in the school that is for folks that are symptomatic. But otherwise, we are only notifying folks when action is required, and folks need to be made aware, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Taylor. We talked a lot about making sure that we keep our students home when they're not well, and we've discussed the various options that exist for families to take advantage of if they don't feel comfortable sending their children to school. We've had a number of teachers and staff members on our program tonight, and Meg weighed in and wanted to know, what if a teacher doesn't feel comfortable returning to work? What are their options?
So one of the themes that we've definitely communicated tonight is that our first priority is student, staff, and campus safety. And the federal legislation has provided us a tremendous amount of options in terms of leave that was not previously made available through ADA and through our traditional leave policies. So the short version of this is that if you have concerns or feel as though your circumstances merit that you must take leave, please contact our benefits office. The fastest way to be in contact with our benefits office is literally just to shoot off an email, benefits@ccpsnet.net, or just to call the benefits office directly. There are so many individual circumstances that could qualify somebody for leave or for a temporary reassignment, and we would want to talk through those specific circumstances because your situation may be unique to you and your family, and we want to honor that, and we want to do so in a confidential way rather than just list off a bunch of criteria one way or another and potentially shut folks off to an opportunity that they could have access to because their situation is unique.
Great, thank you. And I joked earlier about breaking the internet, but at that time that we've dropped off in between the Facebook platform, the YouTube platform, and our website, we had upwards of about 1,500 people watching. So we want to finish out strong with these last couple of questions. And we know during this anxious time for many that sometimes misinformation starts to take hold and people start to speculate and hypothesize what education will look like. We've heard rumors, and some people have mentioned them on our feeds tonight, about moving to a 4x4 schedule, the arts program disappearing, no more electives at the high school level. What are we going to do about resources at the elementary school level? Can you clarify information about a 4x4 schedule to include what that means and whether or not we're looking at it, and then what a typical school day might look like under these circumstances?
I'll certainly rely on Dr. High and Dr. Pope to fill in on anything that I miss. But just very succinctly, I'll say this. It wouldn't be prudent for us to take any option off the table at this time, but our focus is really on a schedule for student learning that we can pivot from easily. And it seems to be that a schedule that mimics what the student experience already looks like today, taking the same number of classes that they would already normally take, would help us to pivot back and forth should we need to from a virtual space to a face-to-face and brick and mortar space. So students who have, say, an odd and even schedule, that seems to be a very practical solution as we move forward, especially with some of the options that we have presented, whether it's an every other day option like option 2, or 2 days in a row in a brick and mortar setting, and then 3 days asynchronously. Both of those lend themselves to the already existing schedule just being fulfilled. So students that were taking robust elective options or classes that are best served throughout a year-long experience, they can continue to do that because we know that this will end at some point. And although returning back to what we referred to as normal is not what our end game really is, because normal wasn't working for every kid, we want to make sure that we are able to be flexible and be able to pivot our learning experience the best way we can while still keeping kids on track and on pace for both graduation and matriculation to their next school at whatever level they're at.
Thank you. We started this morning, or this evening. It's been a long day with 3 of these. Started this evening's conversation talking about some of the operational aspects of keeping our schools clean, some of the health aspects about making sure that our staff and our students are checked prior to coming to school. We've gotten into the instructional realm and what the school day may look like. Let's close with a brief look at making sure that we're taking care of our students, their mental health as well. This has been a difficult time for many. How are we using some of the federal funds that we're getting as a result of the COVID legislation in Congress?
So I will say that our funding partners have definitely come to the aid to support us in light of some really challenging times. Our citizens may recall and our families may recall that this school board passed one of the most aggressive and most robust school board budgets in the history of Chesterfield County Public Schools this past February. Unfortunately, just a month later, we had to reevaluate that based on updated revenue projections from both the state and from our local government, and had to cut $23 million from our budget. One of the things that was prominent in that budget that we were very proud of was a significant increase in special education staffing, ESL staffing for our English language learners, and counselors as a huge part of righting the ship in terms of providing adequate staff in our schools. Now, normally, you would never want to finance an ongoing expense with one-time money, but we do have a couple of pots of one-time money that we want to leverage, at least in the short term, and have reason to be optimistic that in the long term, these will be added back into the state and local budgets to support, and that is school counselors and ESL teachers. We know that these are definitely some of our staff members that are going to be needed most. Our families this evening and throughout the next year will hear a lot about our philosophy of Maslow's before Bloom's, and not just caring for the physical needs of our children, but also the social and emotional needs of our children. So we are spending some of our Federal CARES Act money on additional staffing to support the social and emotional developmental needs of our kids through mental health supports and school professional school counselors. We will be committing some of the governor's GEAR funds, which are additional incentive funds to support recovery towards our returning to learn efforts, as well as for personal protective equipment. And our local government also needs a really strong pat on the back because their allocation of CARES funds will also be shared with the local school system in addition to. That's above and beyond what we would have expected from our own allocation, and our local government is renewing its commitment to public education by helping to support some of our transition needs as we go back into that setting. We do know that our kids have had quite an experience over the past 6 months. Our parents would probably tell you that they have had quite an experience. We all have. And we know that we're going to need to care for their mental needs and what they've experienced when they come back. And we want to be able to open our arms wide and take them in when they return to the schoolhouse.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I'm going to put you on for one more, if you could. Rachel and Kelly pointed out that we didn't really address the 4x4 in terms of what it was and whether or not we were looking at that option.
Sure. So a 4x4 schedule is a block schedule that's a semester based. And like I said earlier, we haven't taken anything off the table. It just seemed less probable to go with a 4x4 at this time because it would not position us well in terms of our pivoting back and forth to a virtual setting if we needed to. We also have the expectation of providing a continuity of the learning experience. And if we know that some of that period may be different than say, the following semester, we would want to make sure that we had some kind of balance in that and could plan throughout the year a little bit better. Not to say that it's completely taboo or off the table, but our focus is really on a schedule that looks a little bit more like what students have previously experienced and would keep them on track to receive the electives that they're looking for, to keep them engaged in the school experience, and also to be able to pivot if we need to.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Heffron, Mrs. Coker, any other questions that you'd like us to address tonight before we start to close out?
I have one question, and I've been hearing this from some folks in my community, but I am also the parent of 3 CCPS students, and they've had a lot of downtime these last couple of months, and so I'm hearing some folks would love to get their kids outside, get them moving again. What do fall sports look like for our students? So
I'll take that one as well. We are participants at the secondary level with the Virginia High School League, which is responsible for competitions, interscholastic competitions for everything from debate and forensics and theater, all the way to field hockey, football, soccer, and everything else that falls in between. And right now, they are seeking guidance on the best approach and practices for opening up. There is a lot of talk about that conditioning could start as early as a couple of weeks from now. And we are looking to get some kind of feedback from that. I'm certain that the governor's phase 3 beginning tomorrow will open up a lot of doors and a lot of possibility for what we are able to do and what the health department will authorize for interscholastic competition. I will say that folks can find some encouragement in the fact that some plans have been made for interscholastic play to occur and for conditioning to occur, which would be a strong indication that the fall season will begin.
Thank you.
So before we start to close out, just want to recap a little bit. Tonight, we've had the opportunity to look over several options that we're considering for the return to instruction in fall of 2020. While we all believe that face-to-face instruction is the best and most useful instruction in terms of engaging students and following their progress and making sure that they're succeeding academically, we know we have some challenges to overcome. We acknowledged at the beginning of tonight that within the past 4 days, we've seen new guidance come out from the American Academy of Pediatrics that we're interested in learning more about, and that we're going to continue to rely on the guidance of the health leaders in our community and state and country to help guide us on this decision. As Dr. Taylor aptly put it, we're educational experts, at least the folks on this phone call on your screen who've been answering questions tonight are, and we're going to make sure that we follow the lead of the health experts in that regard. So coming up, the school board is scheduled to vote on a return to learn option on July 20th. But as we said at the very beginning, that's only as good as the day and the time that it happens on. Depending on what happens in the next month or two across the county, across the state, and across the nation, if we advance into a phase 4, for example, we might be able to loosen restrictions some. If we retract back into phase 2, we might have to come back to the table and look at what we're able to do. But the plan is to have a vote on July 20th during a special called school board meeting and to alert parents as soon as possible so that they can begin planning. Again, we appreciate our parents' flexibility and patience. Our teachers have been rock stars during this, but so have our families. We put them in a position that they didn't sign up for, and everybody has done a remarkable job of adjusting to what some folks have called virtual learning, what other folks have called emergency learning. All of a sudden the lights go out here now too. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Coker to begin to close us out tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bullis. Thank you to CCPS staff and to all the behind the scenes technology staff that can turn on a dime when we have some technology glitches for putting these town halls together for us this week. To our viewers, Dot and I thank you very much for attending tonight. We have had great dialogue in this town hall as well as the earlier ones that we had today. You have provided great feedback, questions, conversation, and it's best to hear community feedback and receive your input. It is always very valuable and we take it to heart. We understand that this situation is not good for anyone, and as members of the school board, we have collectively 15 children in CCPS, so we are right there with you. We understand the potential difficulties that parents will be facing, as we also will be facing those same challenges. But as a school board, we have to step back and we have to look at the best decision for our students, for our staff, and for our parents. We want to get back to a normal school setting as soon as possible, but first we must take steps today to make sure that normal happens sooner rather than later. I wish there was a clear and easy answer and solution to this situation, but first we examine all the information we're given and weigh the best option for our children's safe education. We will continue to make adjustments as we mitigate the educational gaps and provide an equitable education as we work to figure out the return to learning. Please make sure you share with your friends and neighbors that we have 6 more town halls regarding the return to learning over the next 2 days, and we want to hear from them. You should also see surveys in the next few weeks to help fine-tune what the return to learning will look like in the fall. And thank you again for your participation and have a great evening.